When historical people appear in movies, they are usually blown out of proportion. In order to keep fiction more fantastic than real life, filmmakers have to take away all the depth and make characters that are crazy, cartoonish versions of real people, usually at least. One person who doesn't follow this rule is Emperor Commodus. The people who made the movie Gladiator had to change some facts about him in order to make him a bad guy. People would not have believed what the real Emperor Commodus said or did because it was so crazy. He nearly bankrupted Rome by playing Gladiator. We have already told you that Commodus loved pretending to be a warrior. Regular readers may already know that he would get naked, walk into the stadiums, and hit people with disabilities over the head in front of a huge crowd of Romans. Things were a mess, but we haven't told you how bad they were. Commodus wasn't like most gladiators. His actions were so cruel that they were on par with men who beat each other to death for fun. The gladiators had to come to his house and train with him. At that point, death was almost certain. No one would dare beat him, and if they did, he would not spare them. One person went home without a nose or a limb, while the other person never came back alive. When a gladiator in a fight tried to protect the life of his opponent, Commodus would stop them. He was thirsty for blood, so he would tie the gladiators up and make them fight until one of them died. If they didn't, they would never be freed again. Not only is murder not a regular hobby, it hurt the economy too. When Commodus went to the gladiator ring, he charged the government 1,000,000 sesterces to be there. His desire to kill not only took lives, but it also hurt the Roman economy until it collapsed completely. He served 2 people at a banquet. The wickedness that Commodus displayed continued even after he had left the arena. In the past, he even forced individuals with dwarfism to fight each other with cleavers for the enjoyment of an audience. He had a peculiar preoccupation with tormenting those who were physically challenged, and he found methods to incorporate torture into every aspect of life. Even during supper, he brought it with him. During one point, he was hired to serve 2 crippled guys during a banquet. After inviting a large group of Rome's most prominent citizens to his residence, he arranged for them to gather at his dining table. He then instructed his staff to open the silver plate, revealing 2 men with hunched backs, who were covered with mustard. They were not actually consumed by him. He had placed the men on the table as little more than a centerpiece with the intention of entertaining his guests. The men were still alive. In order to keep the emperor and his companions entertained, they were compelled to remain seated on the frigid silver platter during the entirety of the dining party. They were required to keep their clothes off and be covered in mustard. He renamed the months of the year after himself. Commodus possessed an ego that was unrivaled. Indeed, he had a genuine belief that he was a god who was still alive. It was under his influence that the head of the Colossus was severed and replaced with his own visage. He even exerted pressure on the Senate to formally acknowledge him as a deity who was still alive. Commodus, however, was under the impression that he was not merely any god. Rather, he was the Greek demigod Hercules. When he was at the height of his insanity, he began to walk around wearing a cloak that was made out of lion's hide. This was done so that he might appear more like Hercules, and he insisted that everyone call him Hercules, son of Zeus. He went so far as to alter the wording in order to coerce others into praising him. He changed the name of Rome to Commodiana and referred to the people of Rome as Commodiani. Additionally, he altered the names of each month so that they were variants on his own name. It was decided that August would be renamed Commodus, September would be renamed Hercules, and the remaining 10 months would each be renamed to one of the many titles that he had given to himself. He fed his friends to animals. When it came to power, the emperors of the ancient world had gone completely insane in a way that modern man simply cannot compete with. When they were able to get away with things that modern leaders can only dream of, it inspired them to come up with some wild ideas. However, Commodus was one of a kind. Because he was the only emperor to be born during the time that his father was in control of Rome, it is safe to say that he began to consume himself with power from the very beginning of his life. It turned him into a sociopath little bit. It was said that the young preteen Commodus would have everyone who made fun of him cast to the wild beasts. This was according to the Roman rumor mill. Every single one of his playmates who had the audacity to insult him was executed, and there was even a slave who had made his bath too cold. Experiments were also carried out by him. When he was a young boy, he had the drive to become a surgeon, so he would practice on living patients. Once upon a time, he used scalpels to cut into the stomach of a chubby man in order to examine the contents of the stomach. All that was required of his teachers was to look on, watch, and even assist him in doing it. That would be the next step if they didn't. He repeatedly threatened to kill his senators. According to Commodus, his senators were not very well liked. He desired to have entire control over Rome, and the fact that he was forced to listen to the complaints of the representatives of the people drove him absolutely insane. His intention was to completely get rid of them, and he did not hide the fact that he intended to do so. Outside of the Senate building, he commissioned the construction of an enormous statue. It depicted him as an archer, with an arrow aimed directly at the structure, and it was made in his actual likeness. They were forced to look at a gigantic bronze bust of his visage that was gazing at them, ready to kill, each and every time they entered the room. There was a time when he threatened his senators with an ostrich head when he was competing against beasts in a gladiatorial arena. He severed the bird's head, held it up, pointed a bloodied sword at his senators, and gave them a lengthy look of utter contempt, letting them know that they were the next target. He then aimed the bloodied blade at his senators, and in the meantime, behind him, an ostrich without a head was scurrying around and colliding with various objects. He devalued Roman currency. When it came to the fall of the Roman Empire, Commodus was not only a dangerous and arrogant maniac, but he was also a contributing factor. The Roman money was devalued by him, which set off a chain reaction that would ultimately lead to the collapse of Rome. In the days of the Romans, the process of devaluing currency was much more literal than it is in modern times. As a matter of fact, Commodus reduced the amount of gold and silver that was contained in Roman coins, which resulted in each coin being lighter and hence less valuable. Commodus diminished the value of Roman coins by a greater amount than any other emperor since then, although he was not the first person to do so. Nero had initiated the practice. Even during his lifetime, it was a crippling force for the nation. One of the Romans who lived during the reign of Commodus expressed his dissatisfaction with the fact that he had transformed Rome from a kingdom of gold from one of iron and rust. He shirked his duties. Even Commodus did not put much effort into fulfilling the responsibilities that came with being an emperor. For the majority of his rule, he simply delegated authority to another individual. In the event that he was elevated to the position of emperor, he delegated all of his responsibilities to a man named Perennis, and then he took responsibility for the aspect of living like a king. The Emperor Commodus would spend his time at his personal brothel when he was not engaged in combat with gladiators. He possessed a harem consisting of 300 concubines, which he had amassed by ordering his soldiers to pick up the most attractive ladies and have them brought to the palace against their will. Some of Commodus's fixations were quite peculiar. He brought in a young kid, whom he ordered to sleep with him naked and even made to legally rename himself the boy who loves Commodus. He also was the one who brought in the young lad. Commodus also brought his family with him to the event. It is said that he invited his own sisters to become members of his harem, and that he even bestowed the name of his mother to one of his concubines himself. The arrangement was ruined when Perennis discovered that he did not genuinely require Commodus and attempted to kill him. Nonetheless, there was not much of a shift in the situation. On the other hand, Commodus managed to survive. Perennis was put to death, a new individual named Cleander was appointed to take Perennis's position, and Commodus immediately returned to his harem. He betrayed his friends. Cleander was responsible for all of Commodus's work, yet he did not receive a significant recompense for his efforts. The entire city of Rome turned against him, while the nation was experiencing a lack of food throughout the country. In order to protect his own head, the person in charge of grain, a guy named Papirius Dionysius, placed the responsibility on Cleander. As a result, a mob of angry people set out to assassinate Cleander. If Cleander needed assistance, he ran to Commodus, and for a short period of time, Commodus allowed him to hide in his fortress. Commodus, however, listened to the advice of his favorite mistress in his harem, a lady named Marcia, who advised him to throw Cleander to the crowd. Following his many years of devotion, he ordered the murder of his friend. That is a fairly terrible thing to happen, but he didn't just end up killing Cleander. Cleander's head was placed on a spear by Commodus, who then handed it over to the enraged crowd. Following that, he orchestrated the execution of Cleander's friends, as well as his wife and children. In addition, in order to placate the audience, he ordered the mangled remains of the children to be dragged through the streets of Rome, dispersed into the sewers, and allowed to fester. He slaughtered an entire family for being wealthy. In addition to the Cleander family, Commodus also murdered other families. Additionally, he was responsible for the nearly entire annihilation of the Cunctili family. But this was not due to the fact that they had betrayed him or because anyone needed it. As far as Commodus was concerned, the fact that they were affluent and respected meant that it was only a matter of time until the people began demanding for them to form the government of Rome. Therefore, they had no choice but to pass away. He dispatched his soldiers out to assassinate every member of the family, and he came dangerously close to erasing their whole family tree from history. Only one kid, a young man named Sextus Condianus, made it through the ordeal alive. Condianus stuffed the blood of a hare into his lips while they were on their way to capture him. After that, he purposefully fell off his horse and spat out the blood to give the impression that he was bleeding from the mouth. He did this so that they would believe that he had saved them the job and then committed himself. It was successful. He was allowed to escape undetected and escape into the wilderness when they abandoned him for dead. Under the aftermath, however, Condianus was forced to conceal himself and remain under a low profile in order to escape being pursued by the bloodhounds that Commodus had dispatched. He tried to kill the woman he loved most. The lady who had instructed Commodus to kill Cleander, Marcia, who was Commodus's mistress, appears to have been his one and only true girlfriend. With the exception of the times when she disagreed with him, he treated her as if she were his wife, listened to her counsel, and respected her more than anybody else on the planet. Then, because love can only take you so far, he made an attempt to take her life. Commodus intended to declare himself the single supreme dictator of Rome, and he actually intended to do it. He was planning to eliminate the Senate and begin rule on his own from within the barracks of the gladiators when he made his decision. Additionally, he was going to make the announcement in a gladiatorial arena, where he would be dressed as a gladiator and surrounded by other gladiators. As Marcia pleaded him not to carry out the plan, he was convinced that he was going to bring down an entire nation. As a result, he issued an order to have the woman who was the love of his life killed. Commodus's boy sex slave, the boy who loves Commodus, informed Marcia that she was in danger, which was the only reason she managed to survive. It would appear that he did not truly merit the name he was given. Marcia, in collaboration with other individuals who desired Commodus's death, attempted to poison him. However, he threw up the poison. In the midst of cleaning up the vomit in the bathtub, a wrestler by the name of Narcissus was dispatched to the room to kill him by strangulation. It was in this manner that Commodus actually met his end. He was choking on his own vomit while a naked man cleaned it off of him. We hope you liked this video, subscribe to the channel if you're a history addict, and please let us know about what civilization or time period we should talk about. Also, watch another video here.